Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion on the emerging AI topics. We are Women in AI organization of NSF AI Age Institute, and we have 3 student members. I am Jiayu Mao, a PhD student from the Ohio State, and other 2 are Ala Vadadi, a PhD student from USC, and Dabrashri Roy, a research scientist from Northeastern University. We also have 3 faculty members, Professor Julia Safaroglu, Professor Yingbin Liang, and Professor Jim Cruz. Today, we have an incredible lineup of panelists, both from academia and industry. We are pleased to have Professor Ness Shroff from the Ohio State University, Professor Sanjay Shakutai from the University of Texas at Austin, Dr. Sujata Banerjee from VMware, and Dr. Nagin Himayat from Intel Labs. We prepared several questions to our panelists, and now we will start. Ella will start asking questions. And also for the audience, if you have any questions, meanwhile, you could put on the chat, and later on we will ask for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jiayu, for the nice introduction. And hello, everyone. I would like to first thank all the panelists for accepting our invitation and actually being in this panel. So I'm gonna start with the first question, and I would like the answer of the point of view of all the panelists on the first question. So the first question is, how will emerging AI tools impact the progress and direction of AI research?
So do we go in any order, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, we can start from you, Professor Shroff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is kind of a very, very broad question, and I think that there are many different ways in which emerging AI tools will impact the direction of AI research. The most obvious one is that it will help accelerate R&D, because many of these tools will help researchers do mundane tasks more efficiently, build and test models more efficiently, automate things like hyperparameter tuning, do things like coding tasks. Some of my postdocs, for example, have used GPT-4 to generate simulations, generate graphs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done in a very efficient way. Another area which I think which is perfectly aligned with AI Edge is the fact that I believe that distributed AI is going to become the future, and these new AI tools will allow for more efficient scaling of these distributed AI applications. So this is another area where I think we can have a significant impact. Of course, there are things like trustworthy AI, ethical and fair AI, things of that nature, safe AI, which are new sort of developments which will have to be very carefully considered as these tools become more and more commonplace.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so I can go next if just to add, or
they've already.
That is it okay? Yeah. All right. So Ness has said a bunch of things already, so I can just add a couple of other things, I guess. In terms of just in addition to sort of automating sort of mundane activities, I think it can actually create new opportunities as well. 2 examples that come to my mind are sort of AlphaFold. I already see my colleagues in the sort of in the computational science and biology, essentially trying to understand structures of protein. So I know that there's a group here, for example, trying to find a heat stable version of proteins. Okay, you want to understand structures, and so these kinds of things, if you want to try it in the lab, is going to be way more time consuming. It's not just, and it goes, I think in this case, beyond mundane. It requires a lot of creativity and would be publications in its own right to understand the structures of these kinds of things. I mean, only about, I don't know, mid 50 or 60 years ago, which is nothing in the time scale of humanity, was the first protein structures even discovered. I mean, that was a huge deal. There's, DNA and hemoglobin and keratin and things like that so to now actually automate these things and come up with structures is incredible. And so this I think will qualitatively change the nature of science. So this is just one example. Closer to home to the kinds of things we deal with. Foundation models are another huge thing, already changing what we are thinking about. For example, so say take stable diffusion or some such model. The encoder and decoder, it's beyond, I think, capability of anybody in the university setting to actually build such a thing, but or to retrain these things. But these models are already available, and now you can build quick wrappers around it and build very interesting new algorithmic pipelines. So for example, infilling, denoising, things like that. You can do things remarkably well in a different class of algorithms by sort of building on these tools. So I consciously avoided ChatGPT because I'm sure everybody has opinions on that, and so I wanted to talk about things other than ChatGPT. In terms of education, now I think things will could change considerably. Maybe not for the positive, but that may be because I'm a dinosaur. So it was not too many years back that in terms of sort of middle school education, handwriting, cursive writing was a huge deal. Already my daughter's in 8th grade. And so during the time, already you can see that so cursive writing went away about 5 years back. And there's a lot of discussion on that, I think, among parents, whether this should be there. Handwriting is important because they're all using just a Chromebook now to sort of write anything. But already I'm starting to hear murmurings about should students write anything or learn how to prompt ChatGPT. Okay, maybe that's what is going to happen. And it is a little worrying to me. So anyway, I guess this is on the education side, and this is going to go to a different question. So maybe I should stop and let other people speak. I can come back to this at a later question.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I had very similar comments. Ness and Sanjay have covered a lot of the ways in which we envision research evolving. I think your question was particularly AI research. And so in some sense, if you think about robotics or planning, vision, these things now all can be thought of with these tools, how you simplify through either chat interfaces or text-based interaction with some very complex systems like robotic systems. You can make it do certain things that would have taken, hours of programming or careful planning. And the tricky thing, and I'm sure we're going to get into this quite a bit, is the quality of the tool matters, right? So it's not just that these tools are a panacea for every task. They're not. They're really good at certain tasks, but still need human supervision, right? So for the graduate students in the call, how long does it take for you to read a 12-page paper? And if you can summarize it adequately, then it's going to reduce the time to actually sort of read through all of the material that's out there. Now, what is it missing, right? And these tools can be influenced to have a positive view, a negative view, and I'd really like to have a neutral view, frankly, when I read a paper, at least initially. And so some of these things are completely low-hanging fruit, and protein folding and those kinds of things, if we can make a big jump on and do it correctly, I think that would be an amazing achievement. My problem with a lot of these tools are they are almost right. I mean, this is the biggest worry I have, because I need to know whether these are giving me some good guidance on how I should do my research. And that piece, I think, really needs to be worked out. But it's super exciting to see even the first few use cases that have come about. I feel like there are going to be a lot of unexpected uses of this technology that we haven't dreamt up yet.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Himayat, could you please tell us your opinion about that as well?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit hard to cover more ground than what has already been covered. I would say that one area of which maybe not mentioned yet is we might use these tools to generate a lot of data, synthetic data, which would actually accelerate the AI cycle. And that's something to also watch out for. Doesn't need to be in ChatGPT form, but other forms of generative AI. I totally agree that, there could be very surprising opportunities which we have not thought of. And there is just maybe limitless applications which we have not considered. I would sort of also say that there will be more focus on the risk involved with AI now that this technology is, being widely deployed and used. And I think, Sujata, you mentioned they're almost right, but there is lots and lots of examples of making up totally new things, like making up a list of references which never existed and so forth. So there is a lot of danger, and I think it will focus the attention on some of the ethical aspects, the security and privacy aspects, which were sort of like, maybe not so mainstream. So that's one thing that we should watch out for. And also, I think, Sujata, you mentioned is like we should use it for the right purpose. Like, there is a capability of the tool. If we try to dig deeper, is at the heart of it is looking at, next word prediction, sentence completion, and so forth. So are we expecting a lot more out of this tool than what it is capable or designed for? And that's the fallacy of this tool. So I would like other people to comment on that.
This was actually a great point. When I said almost right, it often gives the appearance of being right when it's not. And, there's a lot of stuff on the internet, right? I don't believe all of it. And I usually go to trusted sources. So if I'm looking up medical advice, I'd like to go to Mayo Clinic, places where I think they have the right answer. Now, where is that in this particular sort of environment? We're not quite there yet. And I think transparency of data that is used to build these models will actually be a very key factor. And I loved your point about generative AI to generate data sets. Absolutely, create digital twins of, cyber physical systems. I mean, I think those are really good use cases of generative AI too.
Thank you all. We have a great question from audience, which I am gonna repeat it aloud. And any of you that have any opinion, please feel free to answer that. When we say AI needs human supervision, can the supervisory task be defined precisely? If not, isn't that just a way to transfer responsibility away from the AI? But if so, couldn't we write code to do the human supervisory task?
I'm happy to start.
Sure.
I think in some cases, the supervisory task is clearer than other cases. So in some cases, there are laws, right? So if the AI system doesn't understand the laws of discrimination, bias, whatever, the supervisory task can be defined more precisely. Let's make sure that it's legal, right? The other things relate to human norms and values, and that's, I think, harder to codify or define precisely. There might be differences, subtle differences that might be very difficult. But think about an autopilot system in a plane. Obviously, it's in most large aircraft today, but we haven't done away with the human, right? And oftentimes the human pilot is there to probably just turn off the autopilot when needed. And if you think about, Captain Sully landed the plane in the Hudson, probably he had enough experience and enough understanding to come to that decision rather than sort of depend on something that was artificial. And so, great question, not great answers, but I think this is the discourse we're having. How do we bring in policy and law and human values into this mix?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add to what Sujata just said, that there would be some concern of de-skilling of the workforce as a result of these automated models. And the pilot example is just very spot on, in the sense you want people who are still able to fly planes and land them if needed. So I think the similar things. And one of the discussion is that, how much guardrails would perhaps regulation put in, and what should be regulatory guardrails around some of these technologies. Still very open. And I think the panel was discussing just before that there is a White House discussion as we speak. So maybe you guys can elaborate more.
Yeah. I agree with everything that was said. I think that Tanya has a great comment in the chat where she's basically saying that discussions that touch on concepts outside of computer science and engineering should also include voices from outside computer science and engineering. These might be law, ethics, etc. And many of the questions around, surrounding, some of these policy conversations that Sujata was talking about do indeed touch on items that are outside of computer science and engineering. And we definitely need their guidance. But it's also important to understand, so I think there isn't like a 0-1 solution to these problems, right? Because look, even as human beings, we ourselves, make lots and lots of mistakes in decisions. And so it's impossible to sort of expect that somehow AI is going to be perfect in every decision making. So I think, some of this supervisory task is, humans coming together to sort of establish what the guardrails should be, what the constraints should be, what the overall set of safety requirements should be that the AI can follow. But I think it's still probably too, probably an impossible task to assume that the AI will not make a mistake. The question is, when the AI makes a mistake, we need to have clear laws as to who is responsible, what is responsible, what level of responsibility is borne by the designer, what level of responsibility is borne by the user, etc. So these are all principles that should be coded into these AI systems and coded into laws and regulations around these systems.
Thank you. Professor Shakotai, do you want to add something more to?
I don't have much to add. I think a lot has been said. That's why I was saying. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So let's go to our second question, which is about education. The question is that will the use of AI tools lead to change in the way that education is delivered and received? I will put the question in the chat so everybody can see it as well. Okay, so yeah, please feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, I can take this. I think, the use of AI tools are already creating significant changes in the way education is delivered. And I expect that these changes will only become greater and greater as these tools become more and more prevalent. But Sanjay was sort of, started off by, saying something negative, and I do agree that some of these AI tools do create headaches for instructors, all right, like needing new ways of designing tests that can't be answered by, various versions of these large language models, rethinking how homeworks are evaluated, etc. But I also personally am actually quite bullish about these AI tools. I think there's a tremendous opportunity of democratizing education by making personalized tutoring cheaper. So if you, for example, go to the Khan Academy and listen to TED Talks given by Sal Khan, he is extremely excited about these technologies. And for example, the Khan Academy has created this wonderful tool called Khanmingo that helps students and teachers learn alike. These are tools that basically provide explanations and even sort of simulate human-like interactions with each other. And what he has shown through data on the Khan Academy, which reaches out to a very large population, is that when you have personalized learning, when you have personalized tutoring, the student's performance can be increased by a significant amount. In fact, personalized tutoring on average increases a student's performance by 2 sigma, 2 standard deviations on what it could be. So there is a lot of things that these AI tools can help us enable. And, of course, in addition to all of the automation that it will provide, taking away all of the administrative tasks that one has to do and allow the teacher themselves, he or she to basically spend more time on the curricula, spend more time on the student rather than spending time on the mundane. So I'll stop here and I'll let the other panelists comment.
Yeah, I'm pretty. Oh, go ahead, Nagin.
Yeah, so actually, I more since you already sort of covered the ground well. The question is, are you using these tools with any guardrails or any suggestions in your open academic environment? Like, because they have a lot of risk of, at least in internal, like privacy risks and so forth. So I don't know, are you guys using it with any guardrails, or it's no guardrails yet?
I haven't taught a course since the development of these new tools, so I'll let people who've already taught the courses speak. So Sanjay, when you taught your most recent course, what did you do?
No, I still taught in the traditional method. I didn't use these tools. I taught undergraduate probability for sophomores this semester. I just as a trial, I just put in one of my problems to see what I would get out of it, and the answers are not meaningful yet, but maybe at some point it will happen. But yeah, I still haven't. I have some other thoughts to get back, but I'll sort of let Nagin and Sujata talk, and then I'd like to come back and address some of your things.
No, Nesset Nagin already covered it really nicely. The way I think of it is it's progression, right? So when we had good access, good internet access to a lot of information, suddenly you could be outside your textbook, right? You have, at least when I was growing up, I was mostly focused on a textbook, which now, I don't see our students and kids focused only on that. Now, they do access sources like Wikipedia, sometimes it's not reliable or accurate. There are online math tools like Desmos. If any of you have seen it, it allows you to experiment in a way that, it's mostly for just equations, but it allows you to experiment, try out different things, look at the non-linearities and fixed points in a visual way that no textbook or no traditional method could really provide. So I'm actually very bullish on how education might change. And guardrails, absolutely. I mean, whatever you're teaching, whatever you're learning has to be accurate. But Ness brought up personalized learning. Is this our way, finally, to scale personalized learning? If you get it right, this could have impact worldwide where there are no teachers available in person, right? And so the main thing to think about is this going to be, and the Khan Academy example is the right one, because I did see that myself as well, that can you sort of use these tools to have your own personal teacher or tutor? Does this inspire you more to learn something that wouldn't have been the case with a traditional method? Is it more fun? Does it sort of, instill people to be really happy and creative and curious, right? This is basically sort of the promise. And then, of course, there's a lot of junk out there that you have to be careful about. So the laws of physics, didn't change, shouldn't be changed because of, the way it's being interpreted by these tools.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I agree. I completely agree. It's guardrails is what worries me a lot, because it's not clear what those guardrails are.
Mhm.
So as some parts of things which go away is not a problem. When I was a student, we used to use log tables up to 10th grade. And now nobody even knows what those things are. And does it matter? No, not at all. There are other ways, and people can do calculation and learn concepts. So one may argue that students don't need to learn how to write anymore. Just put some words together and a tool will create a nice essay out of it. So that is more worrying to me. Yes, it will create a nice essay, but the process of sort of writing tells you how to think, teaches us as humans how to think about something internally, how to organize thought, how to reason about something, and how do you make an argument. And this goes beyond writing. Finally, is just a vehicle for these kinds of things. If they find some other vehicle to sort of teach these fundamental things, which I think everybody needs to have, then it's great. But so yes, so you could use ChatGPT and write everything, as long as that the process that writing was used to teach is preserved in some other way. But this comes back to guardrails and how we redesign these curriculum very carefully.
So I think, Sanjay, if I may answer your question, I think it would probably be a mistake to sort of, allow a writing tool to take over all of the writing process, because in a certain sense, the writing process involves thought creation, creativity, et cetera, which are very important and fundamental to what we do. It's not only the sort of the written product. However, you can think of a good AI sort of writing tool or a tutor that, in a certain sense, partners with the student in order to flesh out the student's ideas better, in order to sort of help the student become a better thinker, kind of pointing to sort of the more creative aspects of what the student is trying to do, rather than focus only on form and grammar and so on. So I can imagine that if an appropriate tool is set up, and for example, since we are talking about the Khan Academy, they do have tools like that they have started to develop, which actually work with the student as a partner in order to make them, think better and sort of make them better writers and understand what are sort of the key principles that they should be emphasizing. But by the way, I do agree with everything regarding guardrails. I mean, I think guardrails are critically important. And I think, much like anything else, what we will find is that these guardrails will start to evolve, right? When I was a student, for example, we were never allowed a calculator. Right. And now, when I teach a course, I don't care if students use a calculator, right? Things of that nature. So these things will sort of continue to evolve, and I'm sure we'll figure it out as we understand the technology better. Yeah.
Thank you all. So let's go through the third question, which is about ethical issues. What ethical considerations need to be taken into account as AI tools become increasingly prevalent in research and education? I will also put the question in the chat.
I think we've already covered quite a bit of the issues related to ethics. I think it ultimately boils down to, what values and human norms do we want as a society want to enforce. And again, knowing that the world is, there are probably some values that are, common to every part of the world and some that may not be. And the thing that worries me is as these tools get more embedded into systems, we might sort of not have access to the guardrails or understanding of, how the decision making was done. So we really have to constantly be thinking about bias, emergent behaviors, what are called hallucinations right now. And what I really would like from a tool is it needs to tell me when it's not certain. So in natural conversation, if somebody asks me a question, I often start with, I'm not really sure, but this is what I think. And it's much better to have tools that give you the confidence level. So we get a chance to understand whether to believe it or not. As opposed to a tool that very confidently gives me the wrong answer, which actually in some of the initial experimentation, that's what it seems to be doing. And since I'm more familiar with systems research, I think about, when I read a paper or write a paper about some system that I've built or I want to demonstrate that it's a really good system, we usually also add sort of something about overheads of, it's great performance, amazing system that I have built, but there are these overheads. And I would really not like a tool which basically tells me all the great news and no bad news, right? I want the holistic picture. So these are all ethical considerations. Does truth matter? To me, it does, even if it's bad news. And are partial truths okay? Not to me. So it's those kinds of considerations that we have to be constantly thinking about. And by the way, when we sort of build simulation tools, is the simulator actually doing the right thing? We ask these questions, right? So it's up to us to not blindly believe what the tool tells us, but use our own faculties to decide whether I believe it or not. So ethical considerations are huge. They're really important here.
So if I might just say that this also ties into the education piece of it, right? Like once you're teaching the use of these tools in your curriculum and so forth, the dangers also, like the ethical inquiry should also be taught and the dangers should also be highlighted, because apart from ethics, there is also like security type of challenges, like, you can ask the tool to reveal passwords and do different damage on it and so forth. So those type of education is still important. A lot of it is not known, is still is the challenge.
Right. And actually, just one quick point I meant to say, this also related to ethics, is accessibility to these tools. So does everybody have equal access to it? Is it affordable? I think these are sort of considerations. It used to be that some of the textbooks that were written in the were not really available at affordable pricing anywhere else. And so there was a distinct advantage, or the access to lots of computing may not be available everywhere. So I think as a group that cares about building systems that can be accessed by all, we should really be thinking about how do we lower the cost, lower the barrier of making these tools available. So somebody without a GPU can still use it, or with some low-cost device can use it somewhere in the world.
So one more point regarding ethics, as Ness points out, I always have, I seem to have sort of negative views on things. So, I truly believe that, yeah, we need to have guardrails so that these things happen. There is no misuse. But suppose putting guardrails on these things somehow inhibits the performance or makes it slightly less efficient. Then I'm worried there's going to be a race to the bottom where multiple entities are trying to come up with the best solutions, whether nation states or corporations or whoever. And there is a slippery slope trying to sort of cheat on the guardrails or remove some of them to sort of make your product a little better. And this is a very dangerous slippery slope. And I don't have an answer by any means to this, but these are the kinds of things that scare me about this technology.
Yeah. So, you know, I have been hearing, related to what Sanjay you said, I've been hearing conversations of a AI proliferation treaty, like the, you know, the non-proliferation treaty of nuclear, right? So there, you know, there are conversations about all of this. But one thing that I think, I don't know whether we addressed in this question regarding ethics, is the fact that these AI tools, you know, typically use a lot of data. And so there are very concerning issues regarding privacy and, you know, consent that we must establish, right? So for example, you know, there might be educational settings where students' data might be involved. You know, we know of the very famous case, right, where, you know, the first genome, for example, right, was based on a sample that was unauthorized, right? I forget, Loretta Lynch, is that the person's name? Anyway, I'm forgetting the name of the famous person. So I think we must be very, very conscious about privacy. We must be very, very conscious about how to you know, enable users to give consent easily, not by checking, you know, a box which basically gives up all of their consent, like we do with a lot of, you know, our apps that we use right now. So those are things that I think worry me. Also, the fact that these tools are really only as good as the data that they are trained on. And so they could have biases based on past data. And so if the training, you know, data has biases, then basically the output will have biases. If the algorithms are developed based on the wrong objective functions, like, for example, you know, keeping us on social media platforms for longer and longer, you basically result in polarization of the country, which is essentially what has happened, right? I mean, these are things where, you know, algorithms that are designed without thinking about these kinds of considerations could lead us to, you know, significant problems. And again, I don't have a solution for it, but I do feel that this is something that needs to be carefully considered.
Maybe one of the things to think about in this context is any tech can be used for good or bad. And at least in this particular case, I'm sort of commenting on your comment, Ness, about the importance of data. I think transparency of data, of the algorithms is super important. So, you know, a lot of this research really needs to happen in the open, and really having very proprietary tools, models, data in the long run will actually make it very hard to understand what the guardrails are, what guardrails should be constructed. And so transparency in this particular case is probably another ethical consideration, that I would rather use a tool or a model that I know where the data set came from.
So you're advocating the Meta approach rather than the open AI or the Google approach, right? To the
Yes.
right to the large language models.
And this is not a new problem, right? So when you look at any cross section of sort of the population, we all have different traits. If you think about, you know, in terms of medical diagnosis, it's important to know some traits, what's my gene pool look like that is causing certain medicines to not work or work. So if you apply some, some medicines or some medical advice based on the wrong data set, it could have catastrophic implications. So it's that. So just knowing that this medicine works for group A very well, but it's terrible for group B. These kinds of things need to be front and center as these kinds of tools get embraced.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question about these ethical issues. Do you think the society and the world was ready for the release of ChatGPT?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, I heard in some other panel that this is sort of like a gigantic experiment that they have launched on all of us, and we are sort of guinea pigs interacting with this experiment. I guess not. I think the answer is probably not.
Honestly, I feel like we should not be curbing innovation. It is innovation to have basically this humongous model, right? Now, it's for the rest of us, and actually, I should not say rest of us, it's for all of us to figure out good uses. So this is just sort of an opinion that we're going to invent things, right? Some by accident, some intentionally, and it's important to have a good discourse on it and then decide if we should discard it or use it for some good purposes. And I feel like all tech, or most tech, has both the good and the bad. And so it's up to us, up to society to figure out. So, we're all taken aback a bit, including some luminaries in the field who were not expecting this innovation to come so quickly. But now that it has, let's figure out how to put it to good use.
That's I agree with what's being said. I think certainly it has a potential for a delta function type of an impact. It's a quantum impact, and it has some worrying implications. It may, for example, lead to a lot of job losses potentially. Even in both the blue collar and white collar sectors. So I think there is a potential of making a lot of damage in terms of job displacements. But also the question is, as Sujata said, can we use it to perhaps create a new set of jobs like many other technologies before it have created, and therefore, the overall sort of output is better productivity, better paying jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So if that happens, then it will be a net positive. But we do have to be prepared for the possibility that this could create a huge displacement of jobs, which could have societal implications that we are not ready for, and we may have to be ready for, right? So, for example, if this proceeds in a way in which, say, 3/4 of the jobs in the U.S. are lost, probably, this would create a huge transformative impact on society, right? I don't know if that's going to happen, probably not, but all I'm saying is, we have to sort of be prepared for those sorts of possibilities as well.
Yeah, to some extent, I would say that at least from some of the in some cases it does work well. To be totally frank, I tried to feed in some of the questions that you just asked in this panel to ChatGPT, and I got less than satisfactory answers, or so it's not there yet that humans are out of the loop and so forth. So I do feel that there is perhaps more attention on how you solve these problems. But anyway.
Yeah.
But also, this is not the first time that society is facing something like this, right? Maybe it's coming on very quickly at a very fast pace, but think about sort of, what the Industrial Revolution did. It caused a lot of jobs to go away over time. Probably it was a much slower rate of change. And if you look back and you say, was it all good? Probably a lot of people at that time felt the same way, right? That all our jobs are going away, and some things that you could get really good money for, now you can't because a machine is now building it in this way or that way. So it's also like it's just not the first time, and we will find a way. I think maybe that's my optimistic view.
Thank you very much. And now our next question, which I think we cover most of it, but I am very curious about the examples if you have in mind. And the question is that, will emerging AI tools lead to the creation of new research areas? Do you have any examples in mind?
Okay, a tongue-in-cheek answer could be prompt engineering. So how do you interact with these tools to reveal how the tool actually worked? But yeah, I mean, this is a very hard thing to figure out. I feel like this will definitely lead to a lot of interdisciplinary work, which I'm really happy about. It's going to be going to bring a lot of people, not just techies and AI researchers, to come to the table and decide how we want to use this, what we want to develop, what is missing. So I love that interdisciplinary discourse, and whether it sort of becomes a discipline as a result, I don't know, but it feels like this is actually causing a lot of people to come together in a way that they haven't done before. So I think that is a really good outcome.
I agree, and I wanted to second, Sanjay's original example of the protein folding problem, which had been open for so many, many years. And not only have we solved it, which basically took, one PhD to map out, one protein, we've essentially been able to solve every possible one, right? Which would basically take, have in a traditional setting, might have taken billions of years to solve. So there is a tremendous opportunity to sort of use it in interdisciplinary ways. But I think, to me, regarding sort of a new research area, new educational discipline that this could sort of completely open up, one possible big question would be, how would these automative tools be really used to improve human intelligence itself? So can we, for example, sort of improve our ability to understand things, our ability to be more creative by using these tools as partners? And these in turn could basically lead to completely new fields that are formed in the future. Of course, there are questions, regarding AI ethics, AI law, AI in healthcare, et cetera, that, we already talked about before, that will happen, because of these emergence of these new technologies. But for me, sort of, a big challenge would be if there was a way in which these tools could actually help us understand things at a more deeper level, help us become more creative, more efficient. That would sort of be a big challenge.
I think maybe just another aspect of these tools, which you guys covered, broad range, is how do you develop these tools in a sort of a distributed fashion with limited data, such that it's usable by many people, and it's the democratization part of these type of tools. So distributed computing paradigm for these type of AI solutions and so forth. That's another sort of challenge. And how do you sort of make this happen more pervasively and without the control of a few large companies who can access very large scale computing? So I think that's another interesting area.
Thank you very much. Our next question is that how can we distinguish the research product from AI and human being in future? It's a follow-up question for the previous one.
There is a lot of work on fake catching already. I mean, Intel actually put out some demo recently, one of my colleagues, on fake catcher and how can you distinguish the real person from fake. And when ChatGPT came out, I do recall a Princeton graduate student putting out GPT-0, which would sort of say, you know, how. So I think this is like an arms race, effectively. Put out, you get, the tools get better, you have to detect them, and that thing goes on. Specifics could be, you know, like more finer human traits versus like a machine. And that's an open research area. Maybe you guys can comment more on it.
Yeah, your question, I think, is how do we distinguish the research product, right, from the from AI and human beings? So let me be controversial and say, do we care if the research product is good, if it enhances protein folding, if it enhances, you know, some really good thing, is really, I mean, I don't care about that distinction of the research product from between AI and human beings. But what I do care about is the evaluation of the research product. And there it seems to me that humans will still need to be involved. So, you know, we set the metrics of is it good, is it bad? And humans will still need to be deeply involved in the decision-making of the questions themselves to ask. So for me, it feels like it comes back again to the quality of the product itself. So if the results are good, and just think of everything else before this point. We are using tools, right? We are using a faster computer, access to GPUs and other accelerators, a faster network. And these all, you know, in some sense, help with the research product. I view the tools as part of that. And I don't think, you know, when we were all sort of working out a lot of these problems by pen and paper versus empirical evaluation, you know, ultimately, did it lead to good stuff? And so I think we should focus on the good stuff and then make the tools and other things better to do the good stuff.
I think what you're saying is correct, Sujata, except there is a lot of concerns about copyright, ownership, and so forth, right? So that's where these type of tools you need to do this type of put in mechanisms in place.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So when I sort of say that, you know, should we care, you know, as long as the research project is good, I'm not sort of throwing out the ethical sort of guidelines. And of course, we should be protecting other people's IP and making sure that we are using the data correctly. And, you know, sort of there's a whole data economy here. You know, we're using a whole bunch of people's data, and how are they getting compensated? I think there are a number of issues. Yeah, absolutely. Not to disregard any of those.
And just to add to what Sujata said about, yeah, I completely agree. It doesn't, suppose it's a quality output, it doesn't matter whether it's a human or an AI who has created this. And in some sense, it sets the bar higher for us as humans, because you should be able to distinguish from AI because you're producing something more creative, something deeper, something more interesting and novel compared to what can be routine. So in that sense, if you look at it as positive, it's just saying that as humans, we have to deliver more or newer and cooler things.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of say that Sujata stole my thunder, because that was exactly what I was going to say. So she already said everything perfectly. I don't have much more to add. So we will leave it at that regarding from my end regarding that particular question. But I think that from a societal point of view, not necessarily from a research point of view, I think we need to be constantly vigilant to make sure that the output that the AI generates is actually, output that is truthful and real, right? Otherwise, we can have serious problems, right? So, for example, I see a future in which deep fakes become more and more difficult to differentiate, right? Where basically, what Sujata is saying right now could be completely changed to be, to her saying something quite the opposite, right? And this could have very significant problems, especially in democratic societies, right? Where you could, basically what you could kind of get into an environment where your predisposed views simply get reinforced by what you're watching about people, because you kind of, if you believe somebody is capable of saying this and the video shows that they are saying it, then you basically assume that the video is true. If you're predisposed to not believing it and the video says this, then you will automatically assume that the video is false, right? So things of that nature, I think we need to be very, very, very careful about. But in terms of the evaluation of the product, I completely agree with Sujata. I mean, whether it's developed by an AI or a human, it doesn't matter, as long as if the AI has developed it, then it should be appropriately given credit, right? That this was developed using an AI tool, as simple as that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have only 4 minutes left, and we have a very interesting question in chat. So it might be our last question. Can AI predict the social impact and social harms of emerging AI or other technologies? Should such models be built, and if so, who should build and maintain them? For example, private sector, some government entity, etc. Yeah.
Gosh, the hardest question for the last.
It was actually a question in the chat.
Yeah.
But I found it very interesting. Yeah.
I think there was some discussion about this, which was, earlier, which was that perhaps, these developments should be open source. And so in a certain sense, the greater the number of people that are involved in the building of this in a transparent way, the more likely it is to be successful. Right? If you, for example, believe that such solutions are only the domain of large companies, then you have to worry about the company's own sort of value systems and the company's own sort of biases that come into play. So yeah.
Right. I think I'm not that concerned about who builds the models, as long as we, as members of society as a whole, can evaluate whether the model is credible. So again, coming back to, what was the input to the model, right? And then we can all critique and say, well, this model is really not a good one because it didn't consider X, Y, and Z. And so I think having that oversight, and this is actually a big question. I think there was some discussion on creating an FDA type of organization for AI, so anybody can build a drug, but of course the FDA has to approve, and it has very clear sort of approval guidelines. So I don't know whether we are going in that direction, but I think there is a need, at least, for open evaluation of anything that gets consumed by society as a whole.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We are almost running out of time. So Jia, you will give us the closing statement. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all so much for participating in our today's discussion. And I also would like to appreciate our panelists who are so generous to share their opinions about this type of fast developing emerging AI tools. And also our Women in AI organization will have some other networking events or panels or academia activities in the future. So if you are interested, please pay attention. Thank you. And yeah, it's a perfect discussion today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Very enjoyable discussion.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.